Today's episode is sponsored by Needlesharp. Needlesharp is a subscription service that lets you sew your own style with carefully curated sewing kits sent directly to your door. Each month, they pick a fabulous sewing pattern from independent pattern companies, then pair high-quality fabrics to that pattern, gather all the notions you need, and put it in one convenient box. Let Needlesharp do all the hard work for you so you can get straight to the fun part, sewing your own clothes. Thank you so much, Needlesharp. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 143 of the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today, we're talking about building a retail yarn and fabric store with my guests, Joelle Hoverson and Paige Marchese Norman. Joelle and Paige, along with Jennifer Hoverson Yankee, are co-owners of Purl Soho, a fiber arts supply company that brings a modern sensibility to traditional needle crafts. Joelle began her career with an MFA in painting from Yale University School of Art in 1996. From there, she moved to New York City and got deeply involved in styling and art directing, ending up as senior style editor for Martha Stewart Living. During those years, she discovered a love for knitting and for natural fibers and was inspired to open Purl Soho in 2002. Recently married, Joelle and her husband share their time between Manhattan and their home in Easton, Connecticut, where she enjoys painting, making ceramics, gardening, her 2 white dogs, and of course, knitting. Joelle Hoverson, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Paige Marchese Norman's path also brought her to Martha Stewart Living Omnimedia, where she was one of its earliest employees. She spent 13 years there in numerous creative roles, ending in the position of editorial director of decorating at Martha Stewart Living. Paige has also studied metalsmithing and apprenticed with a master ceramicist, has been a contributing editor to several important publications, has created advertising and products for major UK brands, has styled and art directed several lifestyle and cookbooks, and was the founding creative director of Sprinkles Cupcakes. Paige joined Purl Soho in 2008 as a co-owner. She lives in Fairfield, Connecticut with her husband, her 13-year-old daughter, and their Weimaraner Willow. She also loves to garden, craft, cook, and travel. Paige, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you both here. And I'd love to begin by talking a little bit about the story of Purl Soho. And I know that begins with you, Joelle. So let's start sort of way back in the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, it's sort of not a simple answer. We moved around a lot as when I was young. And I would say primarily I grew up in the Bay Area and Seattle.
And what did you end up studying undergrad? I feel like do you have 2 undergrad degrees?
Yeah, I do. I went first to Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts, and there I studied political science. So I have a BA in political science from there. And then a few years later, when I was living in San Francisco, I decided to return to school and I pursued a BFA at the San Francisco Art Institute. I did a BFA in painting.
Okay. So there must have been something that said to you, oh, wait a minute, I'm like on the wrong path or something.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's an unusual person who decides to get a second undergraduate degree.
Yeah. I mean, I always loved art, making things and making art my whole life. And, that was always a really consistent part of my life. And including even when I was at Mount Holyoke, I always took a lot of art classes there. But I think at that time, I was really young and also just felt like I needed to do something more serious with my life because I didn't really take my art making very seriously. It just seemed like sort of like fun and a hobby or, more just personal interest. And so after graduating from Mount Holyoke, if you study political science, it's kind of like a precursor to law school or something of that nature. And I did work for a lawyer for a little while after I graduated, and I just did not find it very inspiring. And so after I moved back to the West Coast and lived in San Francisco, I just sort of found my way to art school, and it really was the right thing for me to do at that time.
Yeah. And then you came out east and went to Yale to get your MFA. Okay. And
I did.
And then did you feel like you were going to be a painter?
I did. Yes. I don't know if you're familiar with the program at Yale, but it's a very intense program, and everyone there is going there with that intention. And when we all 20 of my classmates and I graduated, that was all of our intention to go be a painter. And obviously being a painter is a extremely competitive field, and you need a lot of time, and you need a certain life, and having a job and being a painter is a pretty hard thing to juggle.
Yeah.
So when I graduated, I did move directly to New York City, and was just trying to do the sort of typical young artist thing of like, get a job, have a space in your apartment where you can paint, and juggle it all. And one of the jobs I ended up doing was painting sets and things like that at Martha Stewart Living, and in doing that, I started making connections with people there, obviously, and the work was really fun and interesting, and the community of people at Martha Stewart, especially at that time, was so creative and amazing, and it just it just drew me in, and so I ended up doing that for work for several years, and kind of leaving painting on the side for a while.
Yeah. Was it sort of like an introduction to the idea that not like the combination maybe between art and business, or art and commerce, or art, sort of applied in a different sort of way, not just necessarily just making fine art, but art sort of seen in a different sort of context, I guess.
Yeah, I think at Martha Stewart Living, the vision of crafting was extremely elevated, and the materials were really elevated, and everything we did was really inspiring, and the best possible materials and techniques, and the photography to represent the work we had done. All of it was so artful and considered and beautiful. It was really inspiring, and really opened my eyes that you could bring a really high level of integrity to things of that nature. It doesn't have to be limited to just painting or, the traditional high arts. And it was really inspiring.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's what we all loved so much about Martha, especially Martha back then. And bringing that high level, that high standard and integrity, as you said, I think that captures it really well. But okay, so that be that as it may, you sort of left painting behind. Did you sort of just decide, all right, I'm gonna get rid of all my painting stuff and just move on and just not be a painter? I mean, to what degree did you really leave painting behind here?
There was a time when I did that, but it was after I stopped working at Martha.
Okay.
So the whole time I worked there, I was still okay, identifying myself that way.
Yeah. You were still both identities. Okay, right. And and then at what point were you okay, wait, I want to open a store?
That was after I left Martha.
Okay.
So I worked there for 4 years, and in the end, I just really felt like I need to get back to my painting, and so I left the job full time, and I started doing freelance styling and juggling freelance work with a studio and painting and studio. And in the meantime, I had started knitting when I worked at Martha. I kind of really finally learned how to actually knit, not just kind of sitting beside my grandmother for 10 minutes and knitting with her, And some of the materials that we used in the story when we did the to knit story at Martha really inspired me. And it was actually some yarn from Manos del Uruguay. And it's so different than the yarn that I was familiar with before that story. Before it was always just, what my grandmother used, which was not particularly anything special. And I was really inspired by those materials. So when I started knitting, I was just always looking for those kind of fibers that are kind of more handmade looking or hand dyed or something very special about them. And they're kind of hard to find at that time. But obviously, Manos del Uruguay was very prevalent. You could find it. So I knit a lot with that yarn. And after I left Martha, I was on the road a lot for the styling work I was doing. And I was knitting a lot while I was on the road. 'Cause it's such a great travel thing to do. And it just really, I just fell in love with it. It was so just a wonderful thing to do. And I started thinking about a store, and, as a stylist, you're kind of shopping a lot all the time, trying to find things for stories and whatnot. And you're in the city in New York, there's a whole world of retail stores that are these special stores that, if you're going to do a story about X, you're going to go find the store that has that, like the really good store. And when you go in, it's, all these independently owned shops with a vision, and it's a pretty cool world. And I kept looking for where's the great knitting store that goes, with these other stores. And there just really wasn't one that was really resonating with me. There were a couple that were better than others, but they just weren't quite like what I wanted. And it just got me thinking. And, I had a day where I thought, you know what, I should do this. I should open a yarn shop. And that was when I decided, like, okay, I'm going to give all my painting stuff away to some friends who paint, and I'm going to get rid of my studio, and I'm going to build this knitting store. And so that was sort of how that happened.
And how is it going to be different? I mean, I wasn't sort of so much in the crafting scene, in 2002, 2001, back then. I mean, I was a crafter, but I wasn't, in the business side of things. So, I don't really know what the scene was like. And so, what was the vision for this? Like, obviously you wanted these special yarns that were a little harder to find. But in addition to that, sort of, what did you envision it was going to be like?
Well, I really envisioned a shop that, when you went in, you felt like the shop had a vision. Most of the shops, with the exception of one in particular, were more just kind of like a bunch of yarn and a bunch of tools and, somebody working there, but there was never really a vision. It's just kind of like, here's where you get some materials. It'd be kind of the difference between, I don't know if you ever went to Murray's Cheese Shop in Soho or over in the West Village in New York, but it's this amazing shop where you buy the best cheese in the world, and you go in and you feel like you're really somewhere special. It'd be the difference between that and just like going to the grocery store where they happen to have some nice cheese, but it's just sort of because they sell it. It's not like their passion and their vision. And so I wanted the store to really have a point of view of natural fibers, lots of color. Like when you walk in, you felt something. And this shop I ended up finding used to be a butcher store on Sullivan Street, New York. And it had this kind of old world quality, and it felt intimate, and you could really just like walk in and feel all this color around you. And also just, I wanted the shop to be really welcoming, and that when people came in, they felt that they were going to be able to create something. And one of the jobs I worked in as an art student was I worked in a lot of art supply stores as a student. And there's always this kind of intimidation factor of going into those stores if you're not really well versed in the materials, where you're like, oh, am I really, like, can I go in there? And, you know, there's an intimidation factor. And I really wanted to make sure that the shop didn't have that quality, that you could come in and you felt like,
even if you're not in the club. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, just people had time for you. They welcome you. They're happy to see you. And also that, like, we're there to open up the techniques and teach and share and make it possible. Because that was, to me, the thing I really loved about knitting was it's so different than painting in that it is like you have your needle with the stitches on it, and you put the needle in and you wrap the yarn around the other needle and you move it over, and that's knitting. It's very simple. It's not this vast thing that you have to reinvent for your own self every time.
Right.
It's a really simple thing. And so I felt really that I wanted to share that, how simple that was with people, and just let them know, like, of course you can do this, and, you know, just share all that knowledge.
Right.
So that was the vision.
Mm-hmm. I see. And was your sister part of this from the beginning, or was it really just you in the very beginning?
No, it was just me in the very beginning. I also had the vision that it would be a little store that I would maybe get one employee to help out so I could eventually take weekends off or something. But it just, the time of when I opened the shop was a time where people were very hungry for yarn, and it was became really busy right away. So it's kind of head spinning first year of just trying to figure out even how to find employees, and, you know, all those things that go along with having a business that I never considered. And that was also when, you know, the internet was becoming more visual. When I first opened the store, I had a page online that just had the address and the hours, and
sure. Yeah, it was 2002. Yeah, it
was very basic. And, you know, people are like, you need a website. You need a website. It's like, I have a website. I have this page, you know. And at a certain point in time, in that first year, I realized, like, oh, I think I need a website where you sell things. And my sister and I had always talked about, oh, wouldn't it be so fun to work together? And all, you know, that kind of conversation. And she was really kind of tired of her job, which she was teaching junior high math out in California. And we just started doing some research, and it became evident that it would be great to work together if she could kind of run the back end part of the website in terms of packing, you know, receiving orders, packing them, and sending them out. And so that was how she came into the business. And we launched that about a year after, maybe a little more than a year after opening the retail shop.
Wow. So e-commerce has really been part of this picture almost from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were the internet was so different than it's been hard to describe. You know, we had to find someone to build the shop from scratch. There were no platforms.
Right.
You know, there were other yarn websites, but, you know, I was looking at them going, we can really simplify how we do this, and people should be able to shop by fiber or by weight. And, you know, and those were like novel concepts in our world. I'm sure there were a lot of websites that were doing things of that nature, but not really in the knitting world.
Yeah. I want to take a minute now to talk about our sponsor, Needle Sharp. With Needle Sharp, you get a choice of 4 different price points with 4 different independent patterns, all of them based on a monthly theme. And once you pick your pattern, you get to choose one of 3 different fabrics. And once you've locked in your fabric, They do everything else. They find the buttons, the zipper, the interfacing, the needle, the thread, everything you need to complete that pattern. And then the box ships out on the first of the month. They're super careful about picking out patterns to make sure they're flattering on lots of different body types and that they appeal to lots of different skill levels. And they also make a point of not repeating themes, at least not for a couple of years. The idea is that when you're a subscriber, you'll be able to build an entire me-made wardrobe, minus underwear and bras, because there are already kits out there for those. So you'll get a bunch of separates, dresses, jackets, and layering pieces. And if you're a subscriber for a whole year or so, they've basically provided you with a me-made capsule wardrobe, which is super cool. The fabrics for each box are hand-selected and carefully chosen to match the patterns. So in that way, they're really trying to help a new sewer learn how to match fabrics to patterns, because making mistakes on that side of things can really make beginners feel like they can't sew, when in fact it was just a fabric issue. Plus, within the 3 options of fabrics for each box, they really try to have a neutral, a print, and a bold color. That way, it's like they can appeal to people with different styles. And they also provide extra fabric to match prints or to account for nap. Needle Sharp is also really proud to be size inclusive. So in December of last year, they introduced a curvy box that includes patterns that range up to size 30, because size should not limit your sewing. And there's no obligation or initial sign-up fee or anything like that for subscription boxes. So you can upgrade or you can downgrade between the 4 options if you want to. And that means that you could sign up and only get 1 box a year if you wanted, depending on how quickly you sew or how the styles fit into your life. Needle Sharp offers discounts for prepaying. So you get 10% off for getting a 3-box pack, which is pretty sweet, or 15% off for 6 boxes, and 20% off if you want to go in for the whole year, which is 12 boxes. That should definitely keep you busy. So I think Needle Sharp is a pretty cool service. I subscribe to their newsletter and I am going to order a box soon, and I think you might want to check it out. So thank you so much, Needle Sharp, for sponsoring this episode. And now back to my conversation with Joelle and Paige. And so, Paige, you came into the business several years later, but you knew Joelle because you had shared an office with her at Martha Stewart.
Yes, it was a fun time for us.
Yeah. So talk a little bit. I know we had mentioned in the intro that you were one of the earliest employees at Martha Stewart. Talk a little bit about your time there and sort of what it was like working there in those very early years and what you sort of gained from that experience.
Yeah, it was quite amazing. And funnily enough, I had the same beginning that Joelle did. Did art in college, but then took some law classes and somehow got it in my head that I wanted to go to law school. So I worked for a lawyer first out of school.
So funny.
And within 3 months, I realized that it was not the right thing for me. And it was actually when Martha had just launched her magazine, and I would run down to the newsstand in the big building where I worked in Manhattan and get the issues and go home and make everything in them and cooking and bring it into the lawyers. And, that was where my passion was. And so I wrote Martha a letter basically saying, growing up, I sewed all my own clothes and I gardened and I cooked and crafted and all this stuff. And I would just love to be a part of your magazine. And so I joined early on when it was just pretty amazing. As Joelle said, the group of people working there weren't editors necessarily. They were all kind of artists in their own right. And I think that was one of the amazing things about it, is that we all came at it from a different angle and just a pure passion for whatever the subject was that we were covering or researching. It was a small group at that point, so we would spend sometimes a year researching the subject or testing the subject or crafting whatever it was to make sure we found the right experts in the field or were able to perfect the craft ourselves, or if it was in the cooking department, which I helped out on as well, and they sent me to cooking school for a while. It's everything. It was, you were just wanted it to be the best it could be. And as Joelle said, working with all these amazing photographers, and a lot of them were young at the time, and Joelle and I are still friends with a lot of them, and we all say we kind of grew up together in this wonderful creative world that was Martha Stewart. So
yeah, that's so wonderful. What it was like an incubator,
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's really cool. And I know your wedding was like completely like photographed and appeared on the pages of Martha Stewart as well.
It was, we look back at it and laugh because Joelle, that's when you joined, right? And
yeah.
I'm not a very, let's just say had I not been working there, I think I would have had a very small, at home wedding, where I grew up in the Hudson Valley, very low key. And it turned into kind of a circus.
It turned into a Martha Stewart wedding.
Yeah. Totally. And I was kind of working on my own, it was my job as well as many other. It was pretty funny. I look back on it now and just think, oh, well, there was a meeting with 10 people and, how I should wear my hair. And I just kept saying I just wanted in a ponytail. So that's when Joelle came in, and I think she was probably like, "Oh my gracious, what's going on? Who is Paige?" And but it was fun, and it ended up being a really fun party. We all just danced until all nights of the hour because I think it had been so intense for everyone.
Right.
We just let loose that night. So that was fun.
Definitely memorable for sure. So,
yeah.
So the two of you had shared this office, and so you knew each other. And I'm just wondering how it came to be in 2008 that you became a co-owner at Purl Soho. Had you been working there part time, or just kept in touch with Joelle and it was time for a career change, or what led to that?
Yeah, well, my memory, and Joelle, you can chime in here, is that I was kind of back and forth. I was with my Martha career, I was in New York for a chunk of 4 years, and then my husband and I moved to London, and so I was the London editor and worked with other companies. And I came back to New York, and that's when Joelle and I shared an office, and then I ended up moving to the West Coast and opening the West Coast office. And I believe it was on my trips back, Joelle, that you opened the shop, and you said to me several times, "Please come join me." And I had just had a baby, and I know, and Martha had asked me to come back to launch a new magazine. And so I think I remember you asking me right after I had committed to that. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be amazing? And so I saw the launch of the magazine through. And at that point, my daughter was about 2.5. And I really, I think, was just ready for a change, and obviously really excited to help Joelle grow the business in an exciting way. So that's how that came about.
You've been part of this ever since. And so Purl Soho, we should just say, moved from the Sullivan Street, little tiny former butcher shop space to where it is now. And was that a few years in, 2 years in, or?
I think it was about 7 years.
Okay, a little longer than that. Okay.
Yeah, more than that, actually. Well, it's hard. The timeline is all mixed up in my head, but we were on Sullivan Street for quite some time.
Okay. And was it two separate shops? There was Purl Soho and Purl Patchwork, and then they merged?
Yeah. So it was right before Paige came and joined.
Mm-hmm.
So I opened with Purl Soho, or Purl. It was called Purl at the time. And then a couple years later,
right before Paige joined, I opened Purl Patchwork a couple doors down on Sullivan Street as well, another super tiny shop. And that was where we sold fabric. We were just going kind of crazy because the spaces were so tiny. I don't know if you ever went to either one of them, but I think Purl, the knitting shop, was about 400 square feet in the front of the store, and then the back was like 50 square feet, the like so-called office and the bathroom and the little tiny sink. And then the fabric shop, I think, was even smaller. So it was very hard to work under that like tight space with all the customers and everything. And we were also, kind of running back and forth between two stores all the time. And staffing is hard, because you want your team all doing kind of working together, So we started just looking around for a bigger space, and then we found it. And so then we moved, I think it was 9 years ago, basically, into the space on Broome Street, because we're coming on our 9th year of the lease this month.
Okay.
It was April 1st that we opened there, I believe.
Yes, I believe so. It was April for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that became sort of the combined one, got a new name of Purl Soho.
Yeah, Purl Soho. And, our website had always been purlsoho.com.
Okay.
And we thought, and everyone would just come in the store and say, "Oh, I'm at Purl Soho," and
I
thought,
see.
why don't we just
call it that?
Right. And, and obviously in the knitting world, there are a lot of Purl this and Purl that.
Right.
We thought we should probably just make it really clear who we are.
Right. And then as far as the e-commerce side of things, I'm imagining that your sister Jennifer, at a certain point, fulfilling the orders out of probably her home was not going to cut it. And I know that you have a warehouse and now a new one in California. So talk a little bit about that side of it and sort of that expansion. And that is also open to the public. And I think if people, people really associate Purl Soho with the Soho store, which, although obviously much bigger than those original ones on Sullivan Street, is still like, it's not a huge store. If you, are used to going shopping outside of New York City, right? It's still very small. It's New York City size. But the one in California is really, really big. And so I think people would be maybe surprised who haven't been out there at how spacious it is, and not realize that it exists and stuff. So anyway, if you can just talk a little bit about that side of things.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's been quite a path of change out there. When we first started with the warehouse, we didn't do it from where Jen lived, because she lived in a tiny little rental apartment. But we rented basically, like, this guy had a warehouse where he made like surfing clothes, and it was out in Orange County where my sister lives. That's why our warehouse is out there. She's just not moving to New York ever. She's just really into the sun and that lifestyle and everything. So, and it seemed like, why not? That's what, the internet is for. You can be kind of work together even if you're not together. We found this guy had a little loft in the upstairs of his warehouse, and it was tiny. I don't know, not even 400 square feet. And we had, some shelves with product on it and a camera, and, we're trying to figure out how to even use the camera and how to get a photo online. And I mean, it was just, we had no idea what we're doing, but we just made it work. But so it was really, really tiny. And then the guy, I think his name was Tony, he kind of went out of business, and they were like, "Do you want to take over his lease?" And we're like, "Oh, can we really afford those?" But we did it. So then we moved into that space, and then we kind of started just growing, and she got a friend, started helping her out a couple times a week, and then we hired this other girl, and she worked there for quite a few years. And then we moved into a bigger space in the same warehouse, like development park. And we stayed in that space for a really long time. We just started adding warehouses to it because they're like these tiny little, almost like a little garage, and they're all adjacent to each other. And you could just like cut a hole in the wall and go into the next one over. So, and we just started growing, and got a little better at all the things we were doing. A couple of years ago now, about 3 years ago, we had upgraded our website a few times between the beginning and 3 years ago, but it was always on this like custom built platform. And we had just a guy who did it, who worked with us for a really long time, but it was, we really just had to move on to a more modern platform. And so we went through a process of totally redesigning the website and getting on a modern web platform and, all this sort of e-commerce stuff. And so we did that 3 years ago, and that was a huge change in the business from a technology point of view. And it definitely changed the way that we sell things, and and sort of it just like all kept kind of growing in these organic ways. So that was a big change that was like a deliberate change. And then eventually, about I think it's 2 years ago now, we realized we really needed to move the warehouse into a bigger space that wasn't all these like piecemeal little places put together, because we just didn't have enough room. And it seemed
not very efficient.
Yeah, not efficient, and it wasn't very nice. Like the warehouse space itself was kind of depressing, and we have assembled a pretty solid team out there over the years, and we just felt it was time to get a space that really reflected our business, the qualities of the business, the things we cared about. We found this new space, and it was actually a little bigger than we probably would have gotten, but it's beautiful. And we were able to just paint the whole thing white and move our stuff in. And it's just this big open space, and it's quite inspiring. I finally had time to go out there at Thanksgiving last year after we moved in. I had only been there before we moved in before that. And it was amazing how big it is and all that, especially compared to our New York world. So,
yeah. And I know I want to go back to the site redesign a little bit, because it does really sound as though, I know how intensive and expensive and also just overwhelming and all-encompassing and a site redesign like that can be. But it's so incredibly important, it sounds like, to the health and wellness of the business as a whole. And so very, very much worth doing. But I know you've said that you wanted the site to sort of reflect as closely as possible what it's actually like to experience coming into the store. So like being on the site is like a mirror of being in the store. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a pretty unique and interesting way of thinking about a website.
Yeah. I think the store, we always, Paige and I both were stylists for a long time, and, just people who care about visual stuff. And so this shop was always, we tried to just make it really beautiful and have like a vision in the store that was appealing. So when we did the new website, we wanted to communicate that same feeling. And it was overwhelming to redesign the site, because it was really like soup to nuts, like every single thing we had ever done, getting it all in one vision, because we had so many different pieces coming in throughout the years onto the website, and it wasn't a whole, it was like a lot of little bits. And so creating that feeling of like having a whole. And
I think we sometimes forget part of the issue was making people realize that the blog, then called Purl B, and the e-commerce site were the same company. And that was part of this new website, was trying to integrate the two worlds.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So the Purl Bee was the name of the blog. Now all of those tutorials, and there's lots and lots of them, and there's, knitting, crochet, sewing, general crafting, weaving, embroidery. There's lots and lots of online content that's, very fine, very beautifully done. And some of it's, really gone viral, and has been pinned a bazillion times. And, is lots and lots and lots of people have sewn or knit, some of these items. And those tutorials I just want to maybe talk a little bit about like the role that they've played in the business and sort of who creates them and why they're important. Because I think, it's maybe a piece that some retailers miss. Like, well, why would I put a free tutorial online? Like, for what?
It's interesting. I almost like, there's so much to talk about in our business. I almost like forget about the role of that. But, if you go back to the early days in the shop, like I was saying before, it was such an important part of the vision to teach people how to do things and to welcome people in and be like, here, you can make this, and like help people put together a project. And, when we would have customers come in the shop, that was what we did. You find out what they want, you talk to them, you help them find the right thing and the right pattern and the right yarn and the right tools and put it all together. And then you help them learn the techniques, and then they go and do it. And then that's how we would do it in the shop. And when we had the website at first, I was realizing, like, how do we get that? Like, people don't just buy yarn because if they don't know what it is, like, where do you give the content of what to do with it? And how do you make that contact with people? And, back then blogs were kind of new, and I was able to just kind of put one together on the fly. And I did it one night, and then it started the blog of like, oh, we should give pictures of ideas and how to do things. And, that was kind of the way to connect with customers. And it was just it wasn't, obviously it was intentional because we made the effort to do it, but I think ultimately that became like our voice. It began to drive the whole business.
Mm-hmm. That's really, I joined because I remember you and I sitting there talking, and you had done like one or two things on it. And I think because of our background at Martha, where it really was about teaching things to people to do things in the most success, or to set them up for success, and in an aspirational way. So we realized, just showing people how to do things in the clearest way possible when it came to what we call the how-to photos in the tutorials, and photographing them in a beautiful way with beautiful materials. And
I think we both it was so obvious to both of us, like, this is like publishing, but without the machinery of publishing, like we can do it. And so it was fun, exciting, and it changed everything because, in fact, like, not only were people coming to the store and saying, oh, I'm at Purl Soho, they were coming in and saying, oh, I'm at the Purl Bee, and it was sort of giving a context for the store rather than the store giving it a context. And so that totally changed our business. I mean, it became our business. So, and it still is. And so, now putting it all together in one vision on the website was really hard because it was very homemade, though, like, technically, on the back end.
Oh, sure.
And
I think Joelle and I just really believe that if you elevate the photos, even on the e-commerce side, it's really respecting the product or the material, whatever it is you're photographing, and gives the customer a wonderful experience while looking for it, because the world was changing so quickly digitally, where, because I think so many people said, oh gosh, this e-commerce stuff, like there will always be products that people want to touch and feel in person and not buy online. But Joelle and I would photograph the products ourselves on, a pretty surface. And again, just over the years, we still are quite hard on ourselves. Like, those photos just aren't inspiring. Let's reshoot those, so it's always been very important for us.
Right. And you're able to overcome that sort of resistance, or I don't know, sort of answer back to that idea that, people aren't going to buy things online that they can't touch and feel themselves, especially things like fiber, like yarn or fabric or things like that. They have to be able to come in the store and feel them themselves. And yes, of course, that experience is wonderful, and there's nothing's going to ever replace that experience. But I think you're correct in saying that certainly, having the how-to online, and then the beautiful photo, the beautifully styled photo, it's pretty darn good for people who are never going to be, or not right now going to be in Soho, Absolutely. Yeah. And have you seen that change sort of, seep out into the wider world of craft, of yarn and fabric in the time that you've been in business? I mean, it seems as though you were uniquely positioned to understand this, given your backgrounds and where you came from as stylists and came from Martha Stewart together. But and you kind of realized about e-commerce and being online early as well. But I'm wondering whether you feel like you've played a role in also in helping to raise that standard, or I don't know if you see yourself in that way at all, but have you watched it change, just sort of in a bigger way?
Oh yeah. I mean, it has changed. It's, from those early days online, before we opened our site, and I was kind of looking around at the websites that were there and all of the photography and everything, till now, the world has changed. We have changed, even though, our early days, like I may have come from Martha Stewart, and then I'm standing there in my own little tiny loft warehouse with my sister trying to take a photo. It was a very different experience than having a really professional photographer take a photo of something, properly. And even for us, things have changed so much, from our early days of trying to communicate beauty till now. And I'm sure we'll continue to change. I mean, I'm sure we've had definitely some impact on the industry, even when opening the shop, the first time I ever went to buy product for the shop, like you couldn't really find natural fibers that easily and stuff. And you can see now that you can buy natural fibers. And in fact, you can buy even the most amazing artisanal, like single sheep fiber, it's like gone so far beyond. Yeah. It's just incredible. And we're part of it. We're definitely part of it.
Yeah. And I know you've now got your own brands, right? Your own brands of yarn. Do you have your own brands of fabric or no?
Well, we have one in the developer. We're hoping to launch a fabric line this summer. We'll see.
Okay. So I'm just wondering about that move. It seems really interesting. And I know, you're not alone, certainly, in having your own brand of yarn. And there are definitely other shops that have done it successfully. And, it certainly makes the shop a real destination, because you're going to get this, unique fiber that you can't find elsewhere. It's this shop's, unique brand. But talk a little bit about the decision to do that and some of the considerations that went into it.
Well, it is a highly complex decision with a lot of layers to it. But if you kind of go back to the thing we were talking about of the blog really driving the business and kind of creating, like, we're kind of following our blog like along of like, what do we need to make this grow? And one of the things that we were having a hard time with early on with the blog was if we make, one of the things about the content is we really try to make our content like evergreen to the best degree that we can. And people come to those pages, for years and looking for project ideas, and they would click on the link to the product. And if the product is no longer available or the colors go out of stock or, whatever.
Which is what happens with yarn and with fabric, especially quilting cottons constantly.
Yeah.
It's always the second it hits the shelf, it's gone.
Yeah, especially the quilting fabrics. And you find it with yarn too, not to the same degree, but like colors would disappear and yarn lines would occasionally go. That was making it really hard for us because we would not, we'd put all this effort into our content and then it would be kind of irrelevant. And, even though most of our content is like free for people to use, it's not free for us to make it.
And it's got to drive sales, right? Like the point of the content, you've got to be able to click over and buy that exact thing. Right. I mean, that's important,
Well, it's the only way, we can afford to do it.
Right. That's what it's for.
And we just do it in such a thorough way that, it takes a lot of resources.
And I know that like people who have visited, I haven't been to Purl Soho in a few years, but I know I have a few friends who were there just really recently. And they said that the fabric section has kind of scaled back. And I'm wondering, is that overall, or is that just in preparation for the new fabric that's about to come down the line?
No, it is overall. And it's really, it's a direct result of this exact issue, because the quilt fabrics in particular, you can't make anything with them in our context, and make a project with it and expect it to be there.
Even like solid, right? Even the solids?
Yeah. I mean, you can with solids. And so we make a lot of stuff with Liberty because we feel that the Liberty, it's very consistent. Even if it's a new print, there's something that you feel is very similar about it. But it just, the really fast turnover of the prints and stuff made it really hard to make our model work for it. And so, and then also, I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but fabric, it's kind of ubiquitous now, like all those quilt fabrics. You can get them online anywhere. And it's really hard to kind of say, like, this is our vision if, the quilt fabric is all about the person who designed it, or you can also buy it at Amazon or fabric.com or like whatever the other companies are. And so we just started kind of narrowing down the quilt fabric collection because of that. And we've introduced fabrics now that are timeless, that we can consistently bring in every time. And, we have a lot of linens and iridescent weaves and these beautiful colors and solid color linens. And, and then the fabric we're introducing now, we've been working on for quite a while. We're really hopeful it's going to come together the way that we want it to. We'll see.
When is that launching? Is that in a few months? I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, this summer. And it's I don't really want to go into too much detail.
Sure.
But it's a collection of solids, but it's a cotton.
Yeah.
And we think it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So we're hopeful it'll be everything that we've seen in the samples and stuff like that.
That's exciting.
So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll, start also adding more content back for sewers and stuff like that as well.
Right. Because a lot of the more recent content has been for knitting because that was more what you could solidly depend on.
Yeah. And developing fabric is really hard because of the scale of it, like the way those quilting manufacturers, the quantity of fabric you have to produce to make
high.
it's just high. Totally outside of we can't do that. So we've had to find our own way to do it. Mm-hmm. So you'll see.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I wonder if you would be willing to talk about sort of if there's been, any big sort of, I don't know, mistakes or things that times when you've done something and you've had to sort of backtrack, things that have been like a dead end or something along the way. I mean, I think the reality of owning a business is that does happen. You get excited and you think, oh, this is going to be the next thing and we're going to do this. And then you do it and then it's just, no, it's just the wrong thing. I don't know if if that anything comes to mind.
Well, I mean, I think it happens all the time, like every day practically in different degrees. That is the nature of having a business, is you're constantly trying things and some things work and you just kind of keep adding resources towards it and other things don't. And you just kind of like, okay, you have to call it and just like rip off the Band-Aid and say like, hey, we're done with this. Like whether it's in the middle of producing something and you can't get the pricing you want, or it's an idea you had that you see is not really fruitful, that's already on the market, and you just kind of let it die or, put it on sale or whatever. But I think that is what business is. And it's very, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Because you can't let your emotion like be the thing that directs you.
Yeah. And do you have any tips too for staying friends? I mean, the two of you have been business partners for, I don't know.
11 years
11
now.
Yeah, that's more than a decade. It's a long time. And, obviously you met as friends and, but it's really different to be in a business relationship. And, I have a business partner for my other business, Craft Industry Alliance. And I know you sort of feel like it's like your work wife, this is like you being in a marriage to a degree. And, in some ways it's more intense than a marriage because there's all this money involved and lots of decision making. And, I don't know. So I just wondered if you have any thoughts on how you sort of stay connected with one another.
Who wants to answer it? We definitely refer to each other as our work spouses, work wives, and I think that we would both say we've come a long way because it is hard. It really is. But I think that just respecting each other, like the more you work together, the longer you're together, the more you just know each other. We can sense each other's feelings without us even saying anything. And I think respecting that, because so much of our time is spent in meetings with others. And I think just supporting one another, even if we might disagree, and then having the discussion afterwards, just completely trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes and knowing where they're coming from and compromising.
Yeah. I mean, it is really hard, I think, because we did, this partnership formed because we were friends. We didn't just kind of start a business partnership based on, if two business people just came together and said, oh, you have those skills that I'm missing and I have the ones you're missing. And like, we're like a puzzle and we're going to, start this business together. I think we both, we came together as partners in this business because we see so much of the same things and we have such a shared vision in a lot of ways. And it is like a marriage in the way that it's like any relationship. It's very intense and it's very hard. But I think, like a long-term marriage, there's compromise, there's communicating, there's listening, and supporting and understanding. And, I think that we've really grown to, like Paige was saying, like, being able to know what each other feels without even really having to talk about it. And I think that has been really good for us, like in the business, being able to like really understand each other. And, when the going gets tough, we just like, we're there for each other. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
But I think it is hard, like I think people just need to know, like, it's as hard as being married.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I have found that to be true as well. It's good, but hard.
Yeah. It's like very worthwhile.
Yeah, it's worth it, but it's hard. It can also be hard. Yeah, for sure. And so tell me what's on your needles right now, or what are you making? What was the most recent thing you made? If it's not something, maybe you don't have time at this very moment, but
I mean, I always have something on my needles. My husband the other day was like, "Are you done with your knitting?" And I was like, "No,
like done with my knitting." Like on what day is that?
This is going to happen forever. But we have this yarn called Goodwool is one of our products that is it's an undyed, like kind of just a real basic earthy yarn that it comes, I think, in 5 colors that are the natural colors of the sheep it comes from. And it's kind of produced in this like eco-friendly way and everything. And we've had the product for a little over a year now, and I've loved it since we got it, but I never had time to actually knit anything with it other than a swatch. And over Christmas time, I finally knit with it. And I was so blown away by how beautiful it is when you're knitting with it. It's this 2-ply yarn, and it's quite fine, but you knit it, I think it's a size 6 or 7 needle. And when you knit with it, just kind of like the fibers sort of open up because it's such a natural wool. And so I made this big triangular wrap that we actually shot after I made it. We're like, oh, here's the project. And I loved it so much that I'm making another one now in a different color of off-white / brown yarn. So that's what I'm working on.
And I'm actually working on the same project, but in one of our new colors of our linen quill, which has been around for several years. And it's one of our favorite yarns, wool and linen, and our new colors that are due to launch. Joelle, help me.
I think in May.
Okay,
It's either late April or early May, but it's 17 new colors. I think we just went crazy with the color palette.
And I'm knitting with one of the craziest, brightest colors, and it just makes me happy. Everyone's like, will you really wear that? Because it's a big thing. I said, for me, it's just the pleasure of knitting with this color, to have it in my life every day.
Yeah. And you might wear it. You never know, right?
Yeah, I will for sure wear it.
Especially in the winter when you need like color in your life,
Yes.
Yeah, put it on.
Yes, for sure.
Well, Joelle and Paige, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the While She Naps podcast. It was truly a pleasure to talk with you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes,
it was really nice.
And you've been listening to the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Visit my blog, whileshenaps.com, where you can sign up for my email newsletter to get the best in sewing, blogging, and small business delivered right to your inbox each week. This episode was sponsored by NeedleSharp. NeedleSharp wants to help you save time and energy by streamlining the process and letting you focus on what you really love. With their one-of-a-kind subscription sewing kits, they do all the hard work of gathering supplies so you can get right down to making your own clothes. And just for listeners of this podcast, they're offering an exclusive discount of 15% off your first order of a subscription box. Simply use the coupon code WHILE-SHE-NAPS, all one word, at checkout. That's so awesome. Thank you so much, Needle Sharp. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.